What was the breaking point where you decided, now is the right moment, something like the bird?
And one of our anchor clients was Nike. They told us, Bruno, we want to take this campaign within a month to Dubai and Paris and Warsaw and maybe to other locations.
Why Blackbird? What is about Blackbird? Why?
Many people assume that it's the Beatles.
Translation, transformation management. So what is it and why should they care about it? Content orchestration is top of your mind these days. This episode is for you. I sat down with Bruno Bitter, CEO of Blackbird in Berlin, to launch a bird and send content from Contentful to Anthropic, review it with ChatGPT, put Tao's quality evaluation on top, and bring a human in the loop to make sure everything runs smoothly back to Contentful. Welcome to a new episode of Language Tech Unbox. So, stay tuned and let's dive into the interview in Berlin. Bruno, we are here because we want to unbox Blackbird together with you, and this is for all our viewers always like the most important thing. We want to see the software, so let's unbox Blackbird.
That's a box.
Let's go. So please show us how would you connect Blackbird with a CMS and do the magic here, for example.
Yeah, let's fly a bird.
Let's fly a bird.
All right. So here we go. Let's fly a bird. I'm just going to click on new bird and we're going to fly a new bird. And it's going to be just like Lego, right? When you have a big bucket of Lego pieces and you have your imagination, you have an idea what you want to build, you can build it. And that's the idea with Blackbird, that you have all the building blocks, you have all the integrations, you have all the tools here.
So
without being an engineer.
The birds are the Lego blocks, right?
The bird is a complete Lego block. All right. So we start with defining when should this bird start to fly. And we talked about a CMS. So let's do something with Contentful.
Okay, cool.
Right?
Yeah, something many people out there are using.
Yeah, it's I think it is the market leader in headless CMS. So it's actually a great example. Here you can see that, here we have our Lego pieces. We have nearly 200 pre-built integrations of Blackbird. So Contentful being one of them. So I can just go to C or just type Contentful and I can go to my Contentful app and hit Contentful. And I'm going to say whenever an entry is published, then we want this bird to fly. So basically we are making, if this happens in Contentful, then we want automatically something to happen. So whenever an entry is published, then we want another action to happen. And what typically we want to happen is we want to download that entry. Okay. And in Blackbird, when we download the entry, we immediately take care of interoperability frictions that could happen. We understand that that content might go to an AI tool, it might go to a translation environment, it might go to all kinds of tools, and every tool would expect a different format or a different friction. So Blackbird, in the background, understands all the things that could go wrong and sideways and preemptively will resolve it so that as a user, we don't need to
it's like
really worry about
the connector, right? The connector work and the translator from different specs.
Basically, not needing to worry about file types and conversions. That chore goes away. Let's do something simple. Let's do something with AI first. And we're going to see and hear a lot about DeepL at this conference. So let's use DeepL, great technology from Europe, right? So we're going to choose translate this content. And we're going to give the file we just downloaded in the first step from Contentful. And we're going to give it to DeepL. And we're going to keep it simple. And we're going to instruct DeepL to translate it into German. And with that, we could already do a round trip. But let's use another AI to make sure that the output of this AI is good enough. And let's make a decision. So
we want to evaluate the quality of DeepL?
Let's do that. I think that's a good practice in AI, to use an AI to police another AI. So let's do that.
Agentic, very agentic everything
That
here.
technology used to be called MTQE, Machine Translation Quality Estimation. It's more like AI QE now, AI quality estimation. And this is a breed of technology we believe in and support. And we have multiple technologies that can do this really well, from Front to Toast to Lara AI. Let's use Toast, one of our technology partners, and we have a battle-hardened integration with them. Their technology is called Toast Epic. So we're going to add a step where we're going to ask Toast to review the translation we get from DeepL. And the logic of this technology that we basically define what is our risk appetite, score threshold, as they call it. Basically,
how good we believe it is.
Yeah. Does it need to be perfect? Otherwise, it should be flagged as risk, or we are more laissez-faire. And
depending on the content type, right? Yeah. Because maybe it's like a support center, like low impact content or whatever. And
different content type, also language pairs. Ultimately, our budget, right? Because the more picky we are, the more we are going to spend on quality. On quality, right? It's a quantitative score natively, but in Blackbird we like good UX, so we asked our UX designer to come up with labels. So
I love the emoticons.
Yeah,
and I see the rocket.
So 06 means only flag disasters, right? And 1 point would mean 0 issues ever.
Okay, so here's basically what we have in light post-editing and full post-editing.
Exactly.
Because like only big issues would be light post-editing.
Exactly. Okay. Let's go somewhere in the middle. Trust but verify, right? Trust DeepL, but let's make sure that if there are any issues, we understand what those are. Right. So we can make an informed decision based on that. All right, so we have our risk score, risk profile of this DeepL translation. And based on that, we can add a decision, something that otherwise would require custom development, right? Engineering, because this is a nonlinear step. But in Blackbird, it's a single click. I can edit decision, and I can define that I want some data coming from one of these steps to be the basis of my decision. And one thing we could do, which is very interesting for a lot of enterprise content, is take actually an average score from TAUs. So instead of considering each and every segment, let's take the average so we can make a binary decision. It doesn't need to be this way, but for simplicity, often this is compelling to content owners. Is it good enough? Is this DeepL translation good enough so we can use it? Or do we have data showing that it would be too risky and we need to do? So here we are just doing a true false. And then we can basically just using a click, we can define that decision. We can, for example, say, okay, if this is greater than, and again, we can define a score. Let's say if it's greater than 0.9, indicating a pretty strong content. If this is true, then we can say, well, then we are going to connect again to Contentful.
And upload it.
Exactly. We're going to then update that entry, upload that entry. And this is the content we're going to push back is the file from DeepL because we know it's good enough. But if it's risky, we can do something else. We can...
Like what?
Well, again, up to us. We have complete freedom, so nothing is predetermined. But a good practice could be, if we want fast and quick and spend a little money on it, we can do automatic post-editing, right? Okay. We could use a third AI. We have already used DeepL, TOS, and we could now connect to OpenAI or Gemini or Anthropic. Let's take a look at OpenAI as a quick example. And we can say, edit this file. So in Blackbird, we have all the complex prompts already offered as simple actions. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to type in a complex prompt. You can if you want to. You have that flexibility.
But you have templates.
But basically, you have templated actions. And I can give that DeepL file to OpenAI. It already contains the prompt. Of course, optionally, if I want to, I can add an additional prompt. I can have full control, even surgical control over details that might matter to me. And then I can choose to push back that version to Contentful upload entry. But in this version, we are not pushing back the raw machine translation from DeepL, because we know that in this branch, we know that there are certain issues, but we have the output from OpenAI.
Okay.
So here we are. If I wasn't talking, it's possible to build something like this in under 10 seconds, from content to AI to another AI, checking quality to a decision where we do automatic post.
This is a swap of LLMs?
Well, we haven't swapped LLMs. We just considered LLMs
this is just
for multiple purposes, but we also have the freedom to swap. So once we have a process like this, we can, for example, decide that we don't want to work with DeepL in this.
In a certain language, for example.
For a certain language, but we want to change it to another tool. So we could just go to Laura, for example,
from Translated.
Exactly, from Translated.
We have a video with Translated CEO on unboxing.
And we could go to Laura and we could say we want to translate it, and we would give it the same file, and Taos would then do the review on that, and OpenAI would do the post editing on that. So we just swapped it basically with 2 simple clicks. Swappability, if that is a word, is possible not only with AI, although it's highly sought after with AI models. We often want to swap or A/B test, right? Different models, but every element of a workflow like this is very swappable. For example, we could decide that we want to get a empty QE score not from Toads, but model front or Anthropic, or that
so
we want to
build them in different like lanes in your production line.
One idea we promote, and one idea that comes from my background in marketing, is A/B testing, something marketers do all the time and have been doing for decades. Marketers A/B test everything: copy, design, buttons, email subjects. In localization design, we could also A/B test. I can take this design, and in Blackbird, with a single click, I can create a clone. And this is like a clone, a carbon copy of this workflow. I can rename it version B if I want to, version B or version 2, and I can make a tweak. For example, I could see what happens if our decision cutoff is not 0.9 score, AI QE score, but 0.8.
Okay.
Well, in theory, we know what will happen is that more content will flow to automatic post editing, right?
To another step.
Yeah, to that step.
In which situation would you recommend a company to go for such a system like Blackbird? What kind of clients use Blackbird?
The more complex an organization is, the more they need to consider edge cases, the more they need to consider a tech stack that doesn't consist of 5 tools, but 50 tools, where there are layers of legacy systems and new systems, where there are multiple stakeholders, where collaboration is needed. And when there are multiple stakeholders, multiple tools, layers of complexity, you need orchestration. You need to have an efficient way to have governance, to understand what's happening, to have. Let's start with the aspect of visibility. Understand who creates what,
assets and how they get together.
Yeah, how our assets are created, how are they stored, what metadata we have, how can we make sense of that metadata, how can that be shared across systems and stakeholders, how could we have a shared source of truth?
So in the whole flow, where's a human in the loop? Can we build in a human in the loop here as well?
It's an essential possibility in Blackbird and in our industry to add value with humans, with experts. And that can be a central part of the process design in Blackbird too. So far we have built an example where we have taken content from Contentful, we passed it to DeepL, used another AI from Toast to understand the quality implications, the risk implications. And we added a simple decision logic. We said if Taos shows us that there are no significant issues, then we are just going to use automatic post-editing before pushing back the localized version. And we could continue with human in the loop. That's the logic of this design. If Taos or some similar technology shows us that there are issues, then let's have human experts look at what those issues are and resolve it. So let's continue building that bird with human in the loop. And we could add an action where we set up a job in a translation management system. For example, Blackbird has deep integrations with all the TMSs. In this example, I'm going to use phrase.
Okay.
So we can go to phrase TMS, and we can just choose upload source file or create a job, and we are able to give it that file from DeepL or the original file from Contentful, whatever we choose to edit. And then in Blackbird, we have this concept of a checkpoint. It means Blackbird can wait for that human to complete that job, which could take minutes or hours or even days, and Blackbird can wait patiently. So adding a checkpoint, we can say exactly what we want to wait for. Phrase calls it on jobs.
Assign?
No, on job status change. That's what we are interested in. And we can even define exactly that the status we are interested in is completed by provider. And when this happens, which is a new trigger in this bird, we can continue the automation. And we can say that from phrase, now we want to download the job target file, which is the human translation. And having that, we can now again upload the entry. So I'm just going to duplicate this step so I don't need to do anything else. Drag and drop it here. And the difference is, of course, is that now we have the human grade translation coming from phrase. We have that file, and we can choose to push that back. So here we are, a simple example how we can have a human in the loop, but determined by actual data. So we have used information from Taos to make an automated decision when exactly should that project go to humans.
Fantastic. So there's one item on your menu bar called Blacklake. This is something new. You won a prize on that on Logworld. What's it?
It was Taos actually in Salt Lake City, where we took part in the innovation competition and won that. So Blacklake is a new architecture. It's a new opportunity to apply memory. You could call it translation memory 2.0 if we want to simplify it. It's really simple from a user's perspective. Let's just take this bird where we downloaded content from Contentful and passed it to DeepL. And we can just add Blacklake over here. We can connect to Blacklake and ask it to prepare content. And what it would do is look at all the existing content in Blacklake. So we can fill up that lake with all our content, including all the content from Contentful, for example. And if you have previous versions of this translation, this is how it's similar to TM, then Blacklake can leverage it and only pass the leveraged file to DeepL, so that if somebody, let's say marketing, only changes a few words in Contentful and that triggered the bird, we don't need to retranslate everything now, wasting tokens and wasting human translation time. So leveraging can happen just like in a TMS, but without needing to send that content at this stage to a TMS. It can also leverage things that TMSs traditional cannot really leverage. For example, custom metadata. It can consider the previous performance of that content. We can also decide what strategy we want to use for leveraging, which is not a thing in traditional TMSs because it's more for one size fits all. We leverage everything. In Blacklake, we can, for example, say we want to leverage only pre-existing content, which was human reviewed and which was created in the past 6 months. So we have more levers to pull, giving a bit more control over how exactly we want to reuse previous content.
Very cool. You have seen this industry from inside MemoQ. What was the breaking point where you decided, now is the right moment for something like a bird?
Great question. There wasn't one single point, definitely not one single breaking point, but I can recall 3 points which sort of led towards this path of starting Blackbird. The first one was quite a while ago, in 2013, then another two more recently, 2018, 2019. So the first one was before my time at MemoQ. It was during the time I was still building my first company, digital agency specializing in content marketing called NextWave. And one of our anchor clients was Nike. And in 2013, we created a campaign for Nike for the Budapest Half Marathon. And it made me realize that it can be a value multiplier. It can be very strategic. It creates value for everyone involved. Like you only had to pay once for the concept, right? And they still had it in all these locations. They scaled it. It was amazing for us as a boutique agency, almost overnight. It transformed us from this boutique regional agency to literally a global one. Yeah. So actually, it allowed me to sell the company when I decided that I want to sell the company, because it was an international multilingual content.
So this marketing. Is where you discovered like the language industry.
That's how I discovered it.
Something.
But I also discovered one more thing, and it wasn't yet the breaking point, but I took notice that the processes and the technologies involved in getting things done, well, compared to where marketing was in 2013, it felt a little backward.
Right.
And then fast forward a couple of years, about half a decade, and I found myself at MemoQ, and I was already in Toronto, where I moved in 2019 to establish the North American presence of MemoQ. And just a year before, this story is actually about someone who's not just here at Gala, but very important at Gala. It's Jose Palomares. And this might be the first time he hears this story. But Jose Palomares was a very important MemoQ customer. He was still at the LSP side. And in 2018, I think that was the year, he went over to the customer side.
To Coupa.
To Coupa, exactly. Yeah. And I had a chat with him, maybe in person, because I was at Lockworld in the West Coast. And he told me that, Bruno, I really disliked the technology setup I found here in this company. Okay. It wasn't MemoQ. And he said, I would really like to use MemoQ, just like I have been. I know the best practices. And I said, well, that's great, amazing. Let's do this.
Let's see what happens.
And he said, he continued, however, and came the painful part, there are all these interoperability issues, there are all these integration needs. I'm not sure if this is possible. And I said, of course, if it's possible. You just said that MemoQ is the best CAT tool, you want to use it. Like, what could be the issue? And without embarrassing anyone, we couldn't make it happen, at least not in the time frame.
Okay.
It could have happened. So that was a breaking point for me, that it's not enough to have good core technology if we slip on the banana peel of interoperability. If that becomes...
What was the main requirement? You couldn't
basically the integration layer, the connectivity layer, the interoperability layer with their tech stack, with their unique set of tools wasn't
there. To send communication and content throughout the whole tech stack.
Yeah, MemoQ plus any tech stack.
Everything else.
Right? So that, and basically there were only two options, and neither was very good. And that when we started with Blackbird, that was the status quo. You had two options. One is to start with a readily available connector,
right,
or use engineering resources and custom build it.
Right.
And both come with a lot of pain and compromises, because off-the-shelf connectors can be very brittle. They are pre-built by someone who envisioned the process, which might not be your process, right? And there's no way to change it. With custom development, you can achieve anything, but it's very expensive. It's very long. So I became first interested and then quite obsessed. There has to be a third way. There has to be a way which combines the benefits of these two, that has the joy of having something almost instantly. We will look at what instant looks and feels like. We will unbox, but has the power of custom development, but without having to use code, right? Okay. But the breaking point, the last, because I said there were three things. So the first one was with Nike, the second one was with Jose and Coupa. The third one was at MIT, actually, because starting 2019, I spent about 2.5 years there at a technology leadership program. It was like an MBA for technology people who are not engineers, so more like the business and strategy side. And it was a really good timing because that's where I first saw GPT from OpenAI. Not ChatGPT, because that came out only in November 2022, and that was GPT 3.5. But at MIT in 2019, they showed us GPT-1.
Oh,
and it was
early
impact, and that again, it was almost like a breaking point. Oh my God, with this, the way we will be able to work with content
will modify
again. So with Web 2.0, we already saw a huge explosion of content, right? Now that everyone could become a content creator, that was already 100x. But when I saw GPT in 2019, I thought, well, this is the AI that will really transform how workflows and content are, and maybe the status quo for technology landscape.
Why Blackbird? What is about Blackbird? How does it come? The name?
Many people assume that it's the Beatles. The Beatles have a very famous song called Blackbird on their White Album. And while I do love the Beatles, it's not the Beatles. We are named actually after the real blackbirds. We are using it as a metaphor because real blackbirds are migratory creatures, at least in North America and in Europe, where they spend the warm months up north, here in Germany, in Canada. But when the cold months come, they fly down to another continent. So through their flights, they literally connect ecosystems. They transcend all kinds of barriers. So we use it as a metaphor because that's basically our mission statement. We want to be like blackbirds. We want to transcend barriers of space and all kinds of difficulties and connect ecosystems.
There's one thing you mentioned in your communication outside, that we're not talking anymore about the translation management system, but the transformation management system. So explain somebody in our audience who has never heard about transformation management. So what is it and why should they care about it?
And you might have segments of your audience who might not fully understand our English conversations. So you might want to use some tool like VoiceSeed or 11 Labs to quickly add dubbing on top of it. So you will not just be interested in translating this content. In fact, you might not be interested in translating it, but you might be interested in transforming that content to make sure that it reaches more diverse audiences. And that's exactly what global companies want to do today. They want to scale their content so that it can, whatever content they have, from marketing content to legal to support content, technical documentation, it can, live and breathe on every touch point, in every geography, in every culture. So for that, you need a bit more than just translation management.
Okay, so the translation management systems are getting too small in the context of today's generative AI landscape, and the transformation content lives through every day.
Exactly. We want, as you said, we want to go from narrow to a broader realm of possibilities. We want to be able to consider how content is changing, how it can evolve. And for that, we need to get away from some of the paradigms of this industry.
Bruno, we are here on a show, so we don't have too much time to explain absolutely everything. But I want to use the opportunity to ask you as well for your vision of where we are heading, how Blackbird plays a role in the next 2 years, and where the industry is moving. So short answer.
So when we came out of stealth 4 years ago, we said in the future there are going to be more systems, more technology, more stakeholders. So you need orchestration technology to reconcile, to connect, to eliminate all kinds of friction between the players. This is still true, but now with AI, we see that everybody is building. So everybody is building agents, everybody's vibe coding. So people are trying exactly, and people can go from 0 to 90%. very quickly, but that 90 to 100% is increasingly difficult. So we believe that our technology will be key from going from 90 to 100%, because that's really about governance, making sure that what we create is compliant, it reflects things that are important for the brand, and we can do it in a way that is in harmony with the whole generative AI paradigm.
Absolutely cool. What would you recommend somebody who is now considering to prepare for this future? What should they do, stop doing right now, and embrace for the future?
Well, the first thing we like to highlight that we really need to stop thinking about dichotomies like source and target, because in today's world where content can be repurposed, the output of one content can become the input of another content. That's what content repurposing is, and AI really speeds this up. So we no longer have source and target. We have orchestration, and we have concurrent content creation. So one thing is to move beyond that and understand how content is planned and created and designed. This is, I guess, the whole concept behind shifting left in our industry. Shift left, get closer to the origins of content planning, understand.
So let go of the structures we have built up in the last 30 years and get flexible again in mindset.
Also seek out opportunities, and I guess technology and some tools are part of that, which enables you to work closer with your counterparts in adjacent areas.
Fantastic. Bruno, that was cool. Thanks a lot for unboxing today with us Blackbird.
It was my pleasure, Jan.
And I wish you all the best. And we will have a fantastic conference here. So you guys check out Blackbird IO. There's Bruno, there's Matis, there's a lot of people on LinkedIn. You can find him. And I hope you enjoyed this show. Be here, be prepared. We will unbox another few tools in the future, and see you in the next video. Thank you.